afternoon. My name is Dharmendra Kanani. Hope you can all hear me. It's a great pleasure to be here with you and partnering with the Warsaw Security Forum on this very important discussion about modern Navy capabilities in the context of the future of anti-access, anti-area denial contexts and policies and strategies. We have a significant panel of speakers with various backgrounds and viewpoints and vantage points into this particular conversation. It's without a shadow of doubt that actually, whilst we talk about A2AD, which has kind of become quite a fashionable term, one could argue that this has been a part of operational activity and strategy for many, many years, many decades. What is different about it is, I suppose, the context we find ourselves in most recently, particularly this past year. We know that the military exercises by Russia, in particular this year, have set a very different tone and very different context for the defence and security context, not only here and in the Baltic region, but more widely within the globe. And people are looking very carefully at what do you do to both use soft diplomacy, but also using the concept of A2AD in the context that we find ourselves in. As I said, we have a range of contributions from our panel. What I'm asking the panelists to do is not to have speeches. I'm going to ask questions of each of them so that we can get a maximum interaction with yourselves about this issue. I suppose fundamentally, the exam question is, what do we do into the future? Not now. And as the Admiral said, and I think the point that you made actually was quite important, and it should be a theme for this conversation, is that if this area and region becomes the strategic vantage point, the flashpoint for future security and defence threats and contexts, what do you do to create a common architecture? What does it take? What are the stakes? What are both the political, financial and diplomatic efforts that need to take place if you are to create some form of common architecture as you look beyond into the next 3 to 5 years? I want to start by asking Tuti first, actually. Tuti, you've got quite some experience in this field in a number of ways as a researcher, a senior fellow researcher. And the question I want to ask you, because it's set a broader context for this conversation, is that how does the dispute over missile defence affect Baltic security?
Okay, thanks. Yeah, are you hearing me? Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I have experience of anti-access area denial issues, but I've been working on missile defense, and I just wanted to point out that many of these examples of Russian aggression, for example, the Russian threats against European countries hosting missile defenses or contributing to the system, and the placement of Iskander missiles in Kaliningrad, and also the busing of the US destroyers, the military ships in the Baltic. They all have one common factor, and that is that they have to do with Russian concerns over missile defense. Although these Russian concerns, they have been mostly dismissed as baseless. But I think we should pay a little bit more more attention to the Russian perceptions, because even if from a technical point of view they seem baseless, the fact is that Russia regards its missile defense system as a threat, and I think Europeans might be ignoring it at their own peril. And I thought, because the connection between the threats, for example, against Denmark and the Iskanders, because the link between them and missile defense, it's more clear, and because we were talking about maritime security, I thought that I would focus on the busing of the ships in the Baltic Sea, which has also taken place in the Black Sea, and I wanted to point out that these ships that have been harassed, they are not just any ships, but they are missile defense capable ships with this multi-purpose launching system that can also launch Tomahawk cruise missiles. And they were brought to Europe as part of the European Phased Adaptive Approach, EPAA, which is NATO's missile defense system, which was justified based on the threat posed by Iran. I mean, that was the original reason for the system when President Obama introduced it in 2009, and then NATO adopted the policy in 2010. And as part of the first phase of EPAA, these 4 Aegis-equipped ships were brought to the Mediterranean. But the thing is that they haven't stayed in the Mediterranean, but they have also ventured to the Black Sea and the Baltic Sea, and I think it's not very surprising that Russia finds it annoying. And this already happened in 2011 when USS Monterey, I think, went to the Black Sea, and then Russia didn't respond so aggressively by bussing the ship, but it did respond quite strongly, and it was asking why are these ships in the Black Sea, why didn't they stay in the Mediterranean? And the most recent case, well, that was in the Black Sea, but in the Baltic, for example, I think it was some US sailor who described it as the most aggressive move by Russia in years. And yeah, I guess I didn't mention the Russian concern. It's basically that the US missile defenses will, in the future, undermine its nuclear deterrent. And that concern might be baseless when you just look at the missile defense site that is being built in Poland, because like this Harvard physicist, Dean Wilkening, argued in his Survival article in 2012 that the SM-3 Block 2A interceptor missiles, they couldn't intercept Russian ICBMs from Poland. But it has gotten less attention that in that same article he also noted that if those same interceptors would be launched from the Baltic Sea, for example, near Stockholm, then they might actually reach Russian ICBMs. And of course, it's we don't even know if these interceptor missiles work, because the tests have been conducted in very scripted conditions. But still, if you think that the United States would be in the same position, I think it would be also a bit concerned, especially looking at the broad picture, because tell me if I'm talking too long.
So just to be clear, that you're not being an apologist for Russian behavior, what you're saying, clearly. But what you are saying is there's a wider context to understand why the A2AD context operates across the region from all different powers, in effect. And what you're describing is that we need to look at it in a more balanced way.
Yeah, I guess I would use the term strategic empathy. Like, you don't have to have sympathy for the Russians, but I mean, it would be useful to understand how they view things. And I just wanted to add one thing about this broader context. According to George Lewis from MIT, the number of the US defensive interceptors is going to be about the same level as the Russian strategic warheads at the current rate by mid to late 2030s. So I think Russia has some reason to be concerned, thinking in terms of strategic balance and so on. And if you bring nuclear arms control, for example, to the picture, then I mean it's on the one hand it's a problem for regional security in Europe, but also for nuclear arms control.
Well, I'm sure that's a very provocative set of comments, which I can tell from the audience I'm sure people will come back on and may have a shared or an alternative view, but let's come back to that in a moment. Can I bring Rear Admiral Varin in, if I can, at this stage? We heard a lot about your capacity and capability from the previous presentation. What's your particular take in the current context that we find ourselves in terms of what we need to do to respond to the context we find ourselves in right now?
Okay, thank you very much, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is very challenging, just to get a question and answer it in a good way. I do my best.
Indeed.
I try to do that. Anyway, I think first we need to understand the context of the Baltic Sea a little bit better. because if we start to discuss this just from a submarine point of view, or just from the point of view of A to AD and missiles here and there, it becomes way too easy. So I'm sorry, I have to complicate the situation.
I'm
much.
pleased you are, because
Yes.
we need to put it in that wider context.
Yes, so thank you. I do that. So today, well, I flew today from Stockholm. It took only, well, 1.5 hours, but it was very cloudy, so I couldn't see what's going on the surface. But anyway, I know that at the moment right now we have some 2,000 ship movements going on in the Baltic Sea, which is, I mean, you can think of that figure a little bit. It is quite substantial. And what are they doing? Well, they are actually transporting goods, merchant goods, to our countries, neighboring countries around the Baltic Sea. We are some 100 plus million people living around the Baltic Sea. And we are just dependent on this sea traffic, that it needs to work. Okay. Then we have another little problem with the Baltic Sea, and the admiral said it could be shut down and be a lake. And I would say that I suppose my government would argue very strongly against it, because we have the Copenhagen Convention from 1857 that actually says that we need to keep the strait open, so it should be a free passage in and out. And that is also something we have to keep in mind. But then the Baltic Sea is very much smaller than the Atlantic Ocean, no question about that. But it is still so big that it is not possible. Well, I say this because I spent probably too many years out there, but I've been out there for 15 years in different positions, and it is too big for us to see from one shore to another shore, and you can't do that. So you have to be out there with different systems. But now, with the missiles, we can shoot from one shore to another shore. But before we do that, we need to know where is the target. And here is the problem. So I'm coming back to the 2,000 ships being out there. And I would like to give you in the audience a missile that can go. Okay, where do you direct it, and how do you know that you don't hit the friendly target, or how do you avoid starting something that you don't want to start? So I think we need to agree on this complicated environment in the Baltic Sea. So that is the first point. Mm-hmm. And then I think we need to, together, in a way or another, we need to build a common picture so we know what's going on. And we can do that on different bilateral means, or we can use NATO, EU, or some other cooperation that works, like Northern Group, for instance. And when it comes to the technique, I think we need to have both ships on the surface out there, actually looking after what's going on. How is it with the 2,000 ships out there? What are they doing, and where are they going? Are they trying to hide something that could be used in a military operation, or what's going on? And then I would like to come to the submarines that you presented very well. I think they are key for actually being out there. Mm-hmm. I think that it would be good if Gerasimov, when he is discussing with President Putin, if he is actually saying that, well, I know there are submarines out there. I don't really know how many, and I don't know exactly where they are, but they are powerful enough to stop any plans here to start anything on a higher level than peacetime operations. So I stop there.
Thank you very much. Thank you for broadening it and clearly bringing in that point of actually it's a trade and commerce route, and that's, you cannot undermine or not view the context that presents for this particular debate, and that having a common sense of what you might do in that context is absolutely urgent and prior to looking at other matters to a certain extent, because you might actually inadvertently do something you don't want to do. I want to turn to Poland, if I may, and ask Michael. Michael, thank you for being here. Very pleased to have you here also. And you obviously are the chairman of the National Defence Commission. You mentioned to me that earlier this year that the National Security Bureau brought out a report, a significant report on maritime security. Can you say a little bit about what that said for the strategic positioning of Poland in the context that we are finding ourselves in and the conversation we're having right now?
W tym towarzystwie, w tym środowisku, w którym jesteśmy w tej chwili, tutaj dla wszystkich z Państwa jest oczywiste. Ja przepraszam, I speak in Polish, unfortunately. Jest oczywiste, że zagrożenia ze strony Rosji to jest rzecz, która nie trwa i która będzie nad naszym regionem jeszcze przez na pewno wiele lat istnieć, czyli państwa znajdujące się w tym regionie muszą mieć świadomość, muszą być gotowe na odpowiedź na temat, odpowiedź przeciwko tym działaniom agresywnym Rosji. Do niedawna jeszcze było to nieoczywiste, takie jak w tej chwili, i twierdzenia polskich polityków mówiące o tym, że Rosja nadal jest zagrożeniem dla pokoju nie tylko w regionie, ale na świecie, łączyło się z odpowiedzią, że to jest taka polska fobia. Na szczęście to już minęło. Nasi politycy dość od początku, od czasu, kiedy prezydentem został po raz pierwszy Putin, mówili o narastającym zagrożeniu. Zresztą warto tu przypomnieć, że w jednym ze swoich pierwszych wystąpień prezydent Putin powiedział, że największą katastrofą geopolityczną po II wojnie światowej jest upadek Związku Radzieckiego, a czytaj szeroko rozumianego Imperium Sowieckiego, czyli wszystkich tych państw znajdujących się za żelazną kurtyną. To powoduje, że obecny rząd polski zwiększa w sposób istotny wydatki na zbrojenia, przygotowuje również odpowiednie dokumenty. Pierwszym takim dokumentem dotyczącym bezpieczeństwa morskiego, jaki powstał po upadku komunizmu w Polsce, to jest właśnie strategiczna koncepcja bezpieczeństwa morskiego. Ona w sposób kompleksowy przeanalizowała zagrożenia, jakie wiążą się na morzu i zagrożenia, które mogą zagrozić bezpieczeństwu i suwerenności Polski, oraz wydała zalecenia, raczej można powiedzieć koncepcję prac nad minimalizowaniem i eliminacją tych zagrożeń. I chcę Państwu powiedzieć, że ta koncepcja opublikowana na początku tego roku jakby obejmuje właściwie większość tych zagrożeń, tych możliwości, a także zaleceń, które przed chwilą były prezentowane jako efekt tej gry wojennej. Ja tutaj chciałbym jeszcze zacytować jeden punkt z nowej strategii Federacji Rosyjskiej, która została opublikowana w lutym tego roku, gdzie w jednym z punktów Rosjanie mówią, że identyfikują jako jedno z głównych zagrożeń to jest pozyskiwanie przez państwa sąsiadujące z Federacją Rosyjską systemów zwalczania środków napadu powietrznego rozmieszczonych na platformach nawodnych. To świadczy o tym, że i również my, polska marynarka wojenna powinna rozbudowywać takie systemy na swoich okrętach nawodnych. Ponadto ta strategiczna koncepcja bezpieczeństwa morskiego również mówi o budowie okrętów podwodnych, ale uzbrojonych w pociski manewrujące, które pozwolą Polsce posiadać broń odstraszania, klasyczną broń odstraszania. Dlatego też jesteśmy na etapie takim mocno zaawansowanym wyboru okrętu podwodnego i wkrótce Polska też rozpocznie budowę takich okrętów. Rozbudowa okrętów podwodnych oraz platform nawodnych, które są w stanie przechwytywać czy niwelować zagrożenia z powietrza, to są takie krytyczne punkty, nad którymi pracuje właśnie rząd, nad którymi pracuje Ministerstwo Obrony Narodowej.
Okay, thank you. And it's obviously the case that what you're saying is that you're upgrading your capacity to match the potential of what might take place, and you're doing this in a way that you're increasing budget and capacity across the piece. I suppose the question in my mind is, and it goes back to what the Admiral said about common architecture, and I wonder what the issue is for yourselves and other Baltic states around how do you create that common architecture, because it seems that that's going to be critical if the strategic response to any threat is to be encountered, that will be the thing, the signifying capacity to tackle what takes place in the Baltic area. But I'll come back to you on that. But Peter, can I come to you last but not least? Obviously, Director of Military Sciences and Senior Research Fellow at the Royal United Services Institute. You've chaired many NATO working groups. Interestingly, Five Eyes Symposia in tactics, etc. What's your particular take on this in this context? And I'd like you to kind of think broadly about NATO's role in this regard.
I think that's a perfect question. I mean, when we look now at who thinks about A2AD, who thinks about warfare at sea, about how they want to fight, and who causes us problems, there are only three navies that really think in the world, and they are the Chinese, the Iranians, and the Russians. And they think about the concepts of how they want to fight. They break the molds and they cause us real difficulties. All the other navies in the world are obsessed with platforms and technology. They're obsessed with sensors. They're obsessed with communications architecture, with networks. And this is really interesting. And it's really clear when you work in the Baltic. Because, as was raised, the Russians choose to buzz American ships in the Baltic. Why in the Baltic and why at sea? Because the sea represents a freedom, an area of space that is not governed in terms of national authorities. And this gives them the freedom to operate. So whilst there are Spetsnaz forces operating in the Baltics, and I'm sure there are some in Scandinavia who are letting down mobile phone towers, all the apocryphal stories, they do it with more restriction than they do at sea. To them, the Baltic, the Black Sea, the Red Sea, the Norwegian Sea, these are areas of freedom in which they can test, they can push the thresholds consistently, and that's what they do. This is how they exercise. And the response from the Baltics, from the Scandinavians, and from NATO has been a sort of traditional response which has been very defensive in nature. It's been walking back. It's been to sort of harden its boundaries, to shore up its coasts, and not to provoke, because this is what everyone is very scared of. And post the Cold War, in an era of peace, you know, one of the things we train captains desperately to do is to fall back on their trainings and not to escalate a situation. And therefore, you know, the Russians at sea have a huge advantage, just as the Chinese have been able to exercise in the South China Sea and the Iranians arguably have in the Straits of Hormuz. So what does NATO, Poland, Sweden, the Baltic states, what do they need to do? I'd say the first thing they need to do is come up with an idea of your concept of operations, how you want to fight in the Baltic, how you want to challenge them, and what you want to achieve. And then within that concept, you shouldn't just fall back on tired doctrines of sea denial or sea control, of interdiction, because this will need to embrace, for the Baltic specifically, very different ways of doing things. In the South China Sea and the Pacific, you can have air-sea battle. You can use air power but not land power in the Straits of Hormuz. But here in the Baltic, you have a unique opportunity to fully embrace jointery. And that's not just air, land, which the Admiral spoke about, and maritime, but it's also about using space, about cyber, and about information operations. But you're doing this in a challenged environment already. You should have seen the news reports of Russia, which is already spoofing GPS within the Baltic, ships, commercial ships, now thinking they're 25, 30 miles inland in Finland when they're passing through the Straits, because Russia is skewing the GPS data. You know, Russia already has sufficient electronic warfare skills in Kaliningrad to blank out the radio frequencies from low frequency through to satellite communications throughout the whole Baltic. It can do it from Kaliningrad, and it can do it from a home. This idea that there will be some kind of beautiful connected network of shared architecture, of ships and land able to talk to each other seamlessly, is a fallacy. It doesn't exist. But this is what currently it's being based on. So what needs to happen? A new way of thinking about the challenge and the response to the challenge, and how the nations here and NATO wants to retake the initiative. Under that fall three big areas in which to take on. Firstly is the capabilities that you want that give you the ability to take that challenge in the face of the tensions that exist. Now, I would say one of those areas that you want to challenge is in the undersea domain. And submarines are absolutely critical to that. I've hunted, in a former life, I spent 5 years hunting Akula, Akula 2s and whiskies, you know, as many of you will have done in the North Atlantic. And no matter what people say, I think the Russians are the best submariners in the world. And finding them is really difficult. So the idea that you're going to have immediate success, or that with new technology you will provide some kind of superior overmatch which allows you to outperform them, again, I don't think is true. This is going to take time. So you need to decide on your platforms, you need to decide on your sensors, you need to decide on how you're going to put it together. Secondly, you need to rethink about tactics. NATO tactics in ASW for the Baltic are wholly unsuitable, as are the joint operation doctrines that they have for here. Throw them out the window, you need to start again. And thirdly, I think you need to start training and thinking and educating your military leaders, because at the moment they follow doctrine in a dogmatic fashion which will lead to disaster and defeat. They must learn to be cunning, they must learn to cheat, to lie, to steal, and to gain advantage. So you have a fantastic opportunity to start from scratch. You have a challenge that's in your face, and you have a group of states that are wholly willing to work with you for a single aim. But you also have a huge challenge, and part of that, I think you should be able to fall back on NATO to provide some of that assistance.
Okay. I'm so glad you didn't hold back at all. That was very provocative and very helpful, in fact. But can I just, in a short answer to this, actually, you refer to different ways of thinking, okay, and that includes NATO, and you were really clear about that from my interpretation. Is NATO up to it, given the current context we find ourselves politically? Leadership is what's required. In terms of what you're describing, someone has to take the leadership role in enabling that new way of thinking and collaboration and coming together. Who's going to do it, and do you think they're up for it?
I think there is I mean, you know, having spoken at the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, I was really encouraged. I think there is a huge political will. And I think, interestingly, I think some of the politicians are more forward-leaning than their military counterparts. I think that the NATO command structure will see Saklant come of age and be reborn, and in that you will have a maritime figurehead and leader who can enable you to do this. So I think when that is cleared, probably next June, you will have this leadership that you need.
Good to know. Let's see what our audience thinks. Really, well, the context is sent for this conversation in the sense that actually it's not simply about logistics and tactics and the investment in submarines. We actually need to have paused time to think differently about our positioning and have some sort of common and shared agreement about what we do with this area, but also not to deny the complexity of a trade route and a service route that feeds quite a significant number of countries across this region. So any responses to what you've heard, any questions that you want to raise? I'd plead with you not to have podium pieces or speeches. I'd like you to make your comment and say who it is directed to as well. So over to you, my colleagues in the audience. Hands up. Surely not. Thank you, sir. Can you say who you are and your question?
I'm Ian Brzezinski, the Atlantic Council, and I see a focus on panelists here with Poland and Sweden. And I'd ask my panelists, including our UK guest, how do you assess the current state of cooperation between Poland and Sweden? Are they fully exploiting military capabilities they bring from the north and the south side of the Baltic? These are countries that are making major investments in air defense, air power, and maritime, both surface and subsurface. If they're not fully leveraging those capacities to enhance together security of the Baltic region, what could they do? What should they be doing together?
Okay, I'll come back to that. I'll come back to that in a moment. Any other gentlemen there at the back? Last row, standing up right now. I believe we only have one mic. I do apologize. Just be patient. Again, say who you are and who your question is aimed at.
Yes, thank you. I'm Kalle Stojescu from the ICDS from Tallinn, Estonia. Well, actually, for whoever will care to answer, perhaps the Swedish representative. First, do you think that the maritime environment is the decisive element in the Baltic theater? I mean, if the Russians would consider that they do not dominate it, then even if they have advantages on land somewhere in the air and so on, but they are not sure about the maritime environment, that they will, I mean, would be a sufficient deterrent in that sense. And the second question is, we know very well the Baltic Fleet of Russia, which is a relic, in fact, from the past. It is much bigger than Russia would need for its own defense purposes now. It only has 7% of the Baltic Sea coast, and it still pretends to be the dominant power. And what are the capabilities of the littoral countries, NATO or non-NATO, around all the non-Russia countries, or even, let's say, US, UK navies and so on, to have constantly in the Baltic Sea to be a sufficient deterrent against the Baltic Fleet? Thank you.
Please don't sit down. What's your view? Given you're in Estonia, you're part of that
well,
basin.
I think
very
that
briefly, what do you think about this?
The Baltic Sea is vital. I mean, if we look to Russia, what is behind our backs? It's the Baltic Sea.
Indeed.
And if we are cut from the back, then we are basically blocked and cut off from the rest of NATO. Of course, it's the question of the land connection through Poland, the Suwalki Gap, and so on. Very much attention has been paid to that. And that's why the main emphasis of the EFP has been so far on the land component. And only now we are talking about the air component and also the maritime area. But we believe that is crucial indeed. Yes. Thank you.
I'll come to the panelists in a moment on your question. Gentleman here. Then I will come to you in the second round.
My name's My name is Wojciech Łuczak. I'm editor and publisher of the Rapport Monthly Defense Analyzing defense paper monthly in Poland. I have a very peculiar question to Admiral Verin. You are in charge of the some doctrines of the Swedish Navy operational and so on, and you were. So I have a very concrete question. Do you consider to re-engaging the rule of operation of your submarines in the Baltic, including the, let's say, equipping them somewhere in the future and changing the fleet into the something like a deterrent force and equipping them with the cruise missiles? Because right now they are only equipped with torpedoes, and your operational let's say, order de bataille is only restricted to the torpedoes operations.
Okay, that's a very specific question. Well, Chris, I'll come to you, and I will come to others in a moment. Michael, can I start with you first in the question about leverage? It was actually related to the point I was making after you finished your contribution about, you've raised the capacity here in Poland, but the question is actually you need collaboration and you need to leverage relationships. And the gentleman, good question from the United Council about how is the relationship between yourselves and Sweden being leveraged to a sufficient degree? And if not, why not? And should it?
Zgadzam się tutaj z wystąpieniem Petera, że państwa bałtyckie muszą i całe NATO muszą zmienić całkiem filozofię postępowania i odpowiedzi na zachowania Rosjan. Trzeba opracować nową w ogóle koncepcję. W ogóle trzeba wyjść od nowa, tak jak Peter powiedział, chociaż nie uważam, że trzeba kraść, kłamać, oszukiwać, ale niewątpliwie dotychczasowe metody odpowiedzi na prowokacyjne zachowania Rosjan nie mają dalej racji bytu. Rosjanie, oni zresztą to zawsze testowali, próbowali wytrzymałości sojuszników i próbowali, do jakiego momentu mogą się posunąć. To jest niezwykłe wyzwanie i oczywiste jest, że państwa z tego regionu powinny ze sobą współpracować niezależnie od tego, tak jak Polska i Szwecja, na przykład Szwecja, Finlandia, czyli niezależnie od tego, czy jesteśmy w NATO, czy nie.
If I may, do you feel right now that the relationship is being leveraged to the degree it should be? If not, why not?
To jest trudna odpowiedź na to pytanie. Te relacje nie są takie, jakbyśmy sobie życzyli i nie są adekwatne do zagrożeń. Tu występują również problemy natury technicznej do takiej stałej współpracy. Nad tym trzeba naprawdę wiele dyskusji i prac i to te prace wymagają raczej szybkiego działania, szybkiego podejmowania decyzji, gdyż jak widać zagrożenie jest całkiem realne, prowokacje trwają, a wiem, że i w Szwecji jest taka pełna świadomość ścisłej współpracy. W Polsce dla nas jest oczywiste, że powinniśmy jak najściślej współpracować ze Szwecją w kwestii bezpieczeństwa na Bałtyku. Natomiast pomysłu na razie jakiegoś rozwiązania nowego, takiego jak mówił Peter, całkiem od zera, no ja nie znam.
Okay. And it goes back, I suppose it goes back to my point that someone needs to take a leadership role in this area, and whether that's NATO or some of the participating countries, someone needs to step into that space and say, let's pull this together. Odd, what's your reaction to this? But if you could deal with that very technical question first, and we'll get that out of the way, not in a disrespectful way. This is a very specific question, that's all. And then we'll go to the wider one.
Yeah, okay, so you want to hear about the cruise missiles on our submarines, and you're correct, we don't have it, and I think we have been discussing that for many, many years, and I think also it's a matter of where we are in technique and the possibilities to do that. And I think the availability and affordability to do that has taken steps forward since, if we go back 20 years or even longer. So we don't have it in the plans. We don't have it on our ships. We think the submarine today is absolutely doing a fantastic job anyway, being out there, being absolutely silent, being having the capability to detect but stay undetected. And that is very important when we talk about peacetime operations, intelligence, and all that matter. So I think when you talk submarines, I think you need to talk submarines all the way from peacetime operations, I would call it, all the way to the high end of hybrid warfare, including cruise missiles. If you give me the budget for it,
But there is a piece about that's really important about putting cruise missiles on a submarine, because a submarine without cruise missiles becomes very specialist at its task and really, really good at it. You know, the sailors, the captains of those ships become absolute experts. As soon as you give them a deterrent role with cruise missiles on board, and this happened in the Royal Navy, it's happened in various other navies around the world, you start to water down their skill level, because they've got to learn yet another skill, and they spend less of their time deployed doing the expert stuff that you absolutely want them to do, and more of their time linking in with a cruise missile targeting agency, of getting downloads to the targeting pack, to practicing getting into the right areas, to coming to launch steps, to practicing launching, to doing telemetry shots. You start to rip out operational days from that submarine. You start to remove capability from it by adding this additional facet. So I would be really wary of adding, conventional cruise missiles to a limited capability, because I think it may well reduce your overall capability as a state, particularly when your neighbour is so relatively close to you that I'm not sure that simply a numbers game for cruise missiles, I mean certainly in the case of Sweden, would do you that much good against the enemy you're facing.
Okay, we're running out of time. I've just been told we've got back-to-back panels, so we need to finish on time, unfortunately. So, Odd, can I come back to you to answer that broader question about leveraging the relationship between Sweden and Poland?
Yes, thank you. And I mean, I would say that the answer is no, we're not doing everything that we could do. I think we could increase the cooperation. Of course, it has to be, it is highly politically driven. And for instance, we have a very, very close cooperation, Finland, Sweden. And I mean, so yes, we can do more, I think. And I agree with you about, get on with it, and we.
Odd, what's stopping it? What do you need for it to happen?
Yeah, I need a political decision to go. So.
Indeed. Yes. Thank you very much. Okay, one last question here from the gentleman. I think you had your hand up, but I will have to ask for you to be brief, but also the panelists to be brief.
Thank you, Maciej.
It's on, yeah, we can hear you.
Maciej Olek-Szczytowski, independent advisor in Warsaw and in London. My question is to Michał Jach, and it's an unfair question, it's a rhetorical question. Given the performance of the Polish Ministry of Defense and of PGZ, the Polish Defense Corporation, state-owned defense corporation, in not being able to order complex platforms, procure complex platforms over the last couple of years, not only under the present government, but under the previous government. We have a whole litany of them, from mid-level air defense and low-level air defense, UAVs, attack helicopters, utility helicopters, infantry fighting vehicles. I can go on for quite a long time.
So get to your point, though.
I will get to the point. When do you really think that we will order submarines? Will it be in this decade, or will it be sometime in the middle of next decade?
Clearly a budget question, so...
It's not a budget question.
I know it's not. I'm being provocative. It's a political question.
We've got the cash. We've got the cash.
It's a political question. Michał, over to you, very briefly.
Zgadza się. Pieniądze są. Według mojej wiedzy minister podjął decyzję, że do końca roku zostanie wybrany dostawca okrętu podwodnego. To jeśli o to chodzi. Natomiast jeszcze jakby chciałbym dodać tą kwestię naszej współpracy. Jest taki dedykowany korpus, Wielonarodowy Korpus Północ-Wschód w Szczecinie, w skład którego wchodzą przedstawiciele właściwie wszystkich państw nadbałtyckich, w tym również Szwecji i Norwegii, którego zadaniem jest być podstawową taką jednostką NATO, która odpowiedzialną za bezpieczeństwo w regionie również Morza Bałtyckiego. No i jakby decyzja polityczna tu jest NATO. Natomiast kwestie współpracy, współdziałania marynarek wojennych na Morzu Bałtyckim wymagają naprawdę dużo pracy jeszcze, żebyśmy osiągnęli ten poziom, jakiego byśmy sobie życzyli.
Okay, whilst you've got the mic, I'm going to ask all of you this because I'm going to wrap up, and I apologise to the gentleman at the back from Estonia to not have your question answered thoroughly. Is that in your kind of 60-second pitch, what do you think needs to happen? What's the shift in behaviour or tactics that we need to experience if we're going to really move this agenda forward in the context of the Baltics and the geopolitical positioning and security and defence issues that we find ourselves encountering? What would you say needs to happen? What's that one thing or two things that you think really desperately need to happen?
Pierwsza sprawa musi być spotkanie na najwyższym szczeblu polityków, mających świadomość, że istnieje taka niezbędna potrzeba i opracowanie takiego planu minimum, który na początek powinniśmy przyjąć.
Thank you. Juti.
Yeah, I guess, well, I think in addition to military tactics and all these new capabilities, I think we should also be looking at confidence building measures and diplomacy, because I think the more things, gadgets and submarines, cruise missiles you get, I wonder if, I don't think that's going to increase Baltic security in the end. It has to be something more political.
Thank you. Odd. And I'm going to end with you, Peter. Oh.
Yes, thank you. I think actually we need to formulate a strategy that we all agree around. The Baltics, all nations agree around the
So a
Baltic
coalition of all the nations around the Baltics.
Yes, and the idea would be to take active use of the Baltic Sea to our advantage, and I will argue for the secure sea lines of communication, so we can have prosperity, and through peacetime all the way up to high end of the hybrid warfare. And I also think that we need to together establish a trustworthy deterrence against Russia. I think we need to cooperate very closely when it comes to the information and maritime picture. And to answer the gentleman in the back here, I don't think that you can point out one single service as a dominate service when you are operating in the Baltic region. You need to operate jointly, and I think also combined between nations. Thank you.
Peter, last but not least.
Start employing criminals, jokers, and heretics to write your doctrine and your tactics. Because if you fail to do so, then we are going to see the Baltic become the decisive theatre, and it's one that will decisively lose.
So it's more a case of know thy enemy better than they know you, in effect. Well, colleagues, short, sweet, but never enough. I do apologise that we've not been able to engage more in depth into this, but actually this is what we have, is the hour. I hope it's been stimulating. It's enabled you to connect some of the dots on the issue, debate the kind of right issues, and think about the kind of change that needs to happen. As ever, with this context, what we know is politics, leadership, I can either undermine or actually escalate positive development. And that's, I think, the key message here is that we need greater leadership and political commitment in a collaborative fashion in this area for things to happen in a more proactive and preventative tone and exercise and tactics. Thank you very much, and thanks to all our speakers for creating a very provocative and interesting debate. Thank you very much.